knock on the door echoed through the otherwise quiet house, and for a moment, I froze. The sound was unremarkable, just like any other knock. But this time, I felt an unshakable sense of dread crawl down my spine. I hadn't been expecting anyone, and yet there it was. The disruption, the invasion, the beginning of something I could not have predicted. It was my nephew, Ryan. He stood there on the threshold, a cocky grin plastered across his face, but there was an unmistakable air of condescension about him. He wasn't the same kid I'd welcomed into my home just months ago. Back then, he had come to me with a sob story. His apartment had flooded. His life was in turmoil, and he needed a place to stay for a little while until he got back on his feet. I was a soft touch, the kind of person who would take in family, no questions asked. I offered him the guest bedroom, told him to make himself comfortable. Little did I know that the simple act of kindness would soon turn into one of the worst decisions of my life. I had never imagined that my nephew, the kid I watched grow up, the one I had treated like my own son, would turn into a viper, waiting to strike. "I need to talk to you," he said, his tone flat, almost too calm for the situation. His eyes flicked over my shoulder, scanning the interior of the house, sizing it up like it was a piece of property. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then his expression hardened. "I'm evicting you." The words hit me like a slap to the face. It didn't make sense. Evict me? From my own house? From the place I had opened up to him without a second thought? My heart sank, but I refused to show any weakness. I stared at him in disbelief. "What did you just say?" "I'm evicting you," he repeated, his voice colder now. "You've been living here long enough, and frankly, it's time for you to go. I want my space back." I felt a surge of anger bubble up inside me, but I controlled it, biting my tongue. What was he thinking? Why was he doing this? I had given him everything, my home, my support, my trust, and now, in one cruel moment, he was throwing it all back in my face. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going to let this slide. Ryan might have thought he was in control, but this was far from over. In fact, this was just the beginning. I stood there, my mind reeling, trying to piece together what Ryan was saying. The words didn't register at first. They couldn't. He was my nephew, for crying out loud. I'd spent years helping him, attending his graduations, watching him get his first job, supporting him when things went wrong. Never once did I expect that one day he would stand in my living room, delivering a sentence of eviction. "You're serious?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaky despite my best efforts to stay composed. Ryan didn't even flinch. "Yeah, I am. It's my house now, and I want you out. You've been here long enough. I've been patient, but this is my time." The words landed with the cold force of a hammer. "My house?" I repeated, still struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. "Ryan, you don't even own this place. This is my house, my home, my everything. I let you stay here because you needed help. I thought I was doing the right thing." He waved a dismissive hand, as though my words had no weight at all. "Yeah, well, you've done enough. Now I want you gone." I felt the anger rise up, in me, but I forced it down. He was family after all, and I'd always tried to do right by him. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. His betrayal stung like 1,000 needles. "You're just going to throw me out like that?" I demanded, my voice growing louder. "After everything I've done for you, you're just going to walk away from all the help I've given you?" Ryan's expression didn't change. In fact, his smile only deepened, the smugness in his eyes making my stomach churn. "You should have thought of that before you got so comfortable. You've been living here rent-free, taking advantage of me. It's time for you to learn that nothing is permanent." His words were like poison, seeping into my veins. Everything I had done for him, everything I had given him, seemed worthless in that moment. It wasn't just that he was trying to throw me out. It was the complete disregard for the sacrifices I had made. The years of opening my home, giving him support, believing in him. And now, I was the one being pushed aside as if I had never mattered. I was shaken, but I refused to let him see it. I had to keep control. I had to keep my dignity intact. I don't know what's going on in your head, Ryan, but this isn't going to happen. I'm not leaving. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms, his arrogance growing by the second. You don't have a choice. I've already talked to the lawyer. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. After that, I'll start the legal process. It felt like a punch to the gut. The lawyer, the legal threats. It was all part of his plan, his strategy to drive me out. My own flesh and blood, plotting behind my back, preparing for the moment when he would tear my life apart. And just like that, he had turned the tables. It wasn't even about me helping him anymore. It was about his own greed, his own desire for control. He didn't care about what I'd done for him. He didn't care about the years of kindness I'd shown him. It hit me then. Ryan had never been the person I thought he was. All the smiles, all the gratitude. Those were just performances, distractions while he set the stage for this moment. He had been playing me, and now I was the fool. You think you can just take everything? From me? I spat, the anger bubbling to the surface. You think you can throw me out without any consequences? Ryan's smirk never wavered. I'm just doing what I have to do. You'll be fine. I'm sure you'll find somewhere else to stay. The audacity, the coldness, the lack of any remorse, it was infuriating. I had no idea what had happened to him. Where was the nephew I had taken in? Where was the kid I'd helped through the rough patches? This wasn't him. This was someone else entirely. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this happen. Not after everything I had done. Not after everything he had taken from me. I wasn't going to let him win. Not like this. As Ryan's words continued to echo in my mind, a surge of disbelief washed over me. My entire life had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes, and the reality of the situation settled in with a cold, suffocating weight. This wasn't just about a place to stay. It wasn't even about the space he was trying to reclaim. It was about control. About him trying to strip me of my dignity, my rights, my peace of mind. But more than that, it was about everything I had worked for, the sacrifices I had made, and how easily he was willing to dismantle it all. I had no idea where Ryan's cruelty had come from. Was this the same nephew who used to come to me, with tears in his eyes, asking for advice? The same one who swore he'd be eternally grateful for my support? Now, he was standing in my living room, essentially telling me to pack up and leave like I was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience to him. But I knew this went deeper than just a personal betrayal. Ryan had no idea what he was messing with. He didn't realize that in trying to throw me out, he was jeopardizing more than just my emotional well-being. He was putting everything I had worked for at risk. I wasn't just facing a fight for my home. No, this was much bigger than that. This was a battle for my future, for my financial stability, and for my reputation. I had spent years building up my life, my business, my assets, my security. And if Ryan succeeded in pushing me out of my own home, it would leave me vulnerable, exposed. My professional reputation was tied to the stability I had built, the image of being a responsible, self-sufficient adult. If I were suddenly forced into homelessness, or worse, if I lost everything, in a legal battle, I wouldn't just lose my home. I would lose everything I had spent decades creating. Ryan thought he was just claiming some petty victory by forcing me out, but what he didn't realize was that his actions could unravel everything I had worked so hard to establish. My peace of mind, my stability, my career. All of it was hanging by a thread, and he was about to sever that thread without a second thought. What he didn't know, though, was that I had a lot more at stake than he could ever comprehend. This wasn't just about losing a roof over my head. It was about my ability to provide for myself and my future. It was about my right to live with dignity and respect. And then, there was the bigger picture. I couldn't let this go, not just for me, but for anyone else who had ever trusted him. If I allowed Ryan to get away with this, it would send a message that people like him could walk over anyone, take what they wanted, and face no consequences. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a warning, a reminder of how easily greed could poison someone's soul. I wasn't going to let that stand. I couldn't. I wouldn't. I had spent my life putting others first, helping them when they needed it most. And now, it was my turn. My turn to take back what was mine, to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. Ryan may have thought he could tear everything down with a few words, but he was sorely mistaken. This wasn't just about a fight for a house. It was a fight for justice, a fight for fairness, a fight for everything I had built, and I was ready to win. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't just sit back and let Ryan's betrayal unfold without doing something about it. I had spent too much of my life working hard, building up everything I had, only to have it jeopardized by someone I had taken in and treated like family. The anger boiled within me, but I knew I had to be smart. This wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. This was my livelihood on the line, and I was going to make sure Ryan regretted every second of this. I needed a plan, something calculated, something that would take Ryan by surprise and expose him for who he really was. No more playing the victim. I wasn't about to beg him for anything, especially not my own home. But I wasn't going to fight him head-on either. I needed to outsmart him. The first thing I did was gather my thoughts. I took a deep breath, sat down at my kitchen table, and started writing everything out. Every detail, every moment Ryan had been with me, every gesture of kindness I had extended toward him, and every subtle sign of his growing resentment. I needed to see the full picture, everything he'd done to manipulate and take advantage of me, without me even realizing it. I had to gather evidence that would prove his actions weren't just rude, but entirely calculated. I went back to the first day he arrived. I recalled the subtle hints, his reluctance to contribute, his complaints about the house being too small, his insistence that I cover his expenses while he found his footing. It seemed harmless at first, just a young man trying to get by. But looking back now, it was all part of the plan, a slow build-up to what he was doing now. But I couldn't just rely on my memories. I needed cold, hard proof. I knew Ryan well enough to understand that he was the kind of person who liked to have his hands on everything, to control situations in ways most people wouldn't notice until it was too late. He had likely been setting things up, probably behind my back, thinking I was too naive to catch on. So I started investigating. I went through his phone records, text messages, and social media accounts, anything that could give me a clue as to what he'd been planning. I wasn't going to let him get away with destroying my life without having evidence to expose the truth. The more I dug, the more I found. Subtle threats to his friends about how he was ready to take the house back. There were messages where he bragged about how he was going to clean up and get rid of the dead weight. It was all there, in black and white, plain as day. Ryan had been plotting this for a while, and I was just too trusting to see it. Next, I turned my attention to his finances. I didn't want to just stop at his threats. I wanted to show his manipulation and his greed. Ryan had been living under my roof without contributing much, always claiming he didn't have enough money, always asking for more. But the truth was, I knew he had been making more than enough to help out. And the little bits of information I found in his bank statements were enough to expose his lies. It wasn't just about the house. It was about money, control, and power. I wasn't about to walk into this battle blind. I had a strategy now. I had the tools to bring him down. All I needed to do was get everything organized, build my case, and then let the truth unfold. I wasn't just going to expose his selfishness and deceit. I was going to show him that he couldn't destroy me. He couldn't erase everything I had worked for. And when it came time for me to confront him, I'd be armed with more than just words. I'd have the proof to take back my life. The moment was coming. The moment when everything Ryan had done, all the lies and manipulation, would come crashing down, and when it did, I would be ready. I had the plan in motion. The pieces were falling into place, and I could already feel the tide turning in my favor. Now, it was time to execute. No more hesitation. No more wondering if I was doing the right thing. Ryan had forced my hand, and now I was going to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. The first step was to solidify my evidence. I needed everything in order. His texts, his financial records, the messages where he had bragged about how easy it would be to take everything from me. I spent days going over every piece of information I had gathered, cross-referencing and verifying each one. It was painstaking work, but it was necessary. If I was going to expose him for the manipulative liar he was, I needed to be meticulous. I also consulted with a lawyer. I wasn't going to just sit back and let Ryan play his games. I needed professional advice on how to proceed. I wasn't going to let him outmaneuver me with his so-called legal threats. With the lawyer's guidance, I started to understand the legal angles better. My rights as a homeowner, the power of the evidence I had collected, and how to respond to Ryan's claims without making myself vulnerable. Armed with this knowledge, I started gathering the final pieces. I compiled a timeline of everything Ryan had done, from the moment he moved in, to his increasingly blatant efforts to push me out, to the messages where he revealed his intentions. I even kept track of the small, seemingly innocent remarks he made that pointed to his growing disdain for me and his obsession with taking control. It was all a web of deceit, and I was about to pull the threads apart. But I wasn't just gathering evidence for myself. I was preparing for the moment when I would confront Ryan, and I knew I needed to be strategic about how I handled it. He wasn't the type to back down easily, and I didn't want to give him any room to twist the narrative or manipulate the situation. The confrontation had to be direct and unambiguous. I waited for the right moment. I couldn't just confront him in passing or in the heat of the moment. I needed him to be cornered, to be put in a position where he couldn't wiggle his way out. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the perfect setting would be when he felt secure, when he thought he had won. That's when he would drop his guard, and that's when I would strike. And so I waited. Days went by, and Ryan continued to act like everything was fine, as if he had already claimed victory. He barely interacted with me. No apologies, no attempts to smooth things over. Just the same smug arrogance. He thought I was broken, defeated. What he didn't know was that every day I spent gathering evidence, building my case. I was getting closer to the moment when everything would come, crashing down for him. Finally, the day came. Ryan was out of the house, running errands, and I knew this would be the perfect time to make my move. I printed out every piece of evidence I had. Every text, every financial record, every message where Ryan had betrayed me, manipulated me, and treated me like I was nothing. I laid it all out on the kitchen table. It was a mountain of proof, and I was about to use it. The plan was simple. When Ryan came back, I would confront him. I would sit him down, lay out all the evidence, and let him see what he had done. I wasn't going to beg him for anything. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to expose him for the fraud he was and take back control of my life. As I sat there, waiting for Ryan to return, my heart pounded. This was it. This was the moment I had been preparing for. When he walked through that door, he would find himself face to face with the truth. There would be no running away, no excuses. Just the harsh reality of everything he had tried to take from me. I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up for myself, for everything I had built, and for showing Ryan that he couldn't get away with betraying me. I had the power now. It was in my hands, and I was ready to take back what was mine. The door opened with a quiet creak as Ryan stepped into the house, his usual nonchalant attitude evident in his stride. He looked almost too relaxed, like he had already won. I could see it in his eyes, the gleam of someone who thought they were untouchable, who thought they could walk all over me without any repercussions. But he was wrong. So very wrong. I stood up from the kitchen table, where I had carefully laid out all the evidence, every message, every financial statement, everything that proved Ryan had been manipulating me and planning this entire situation from the start. I didn't say a word as he walked in. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my anger right away. I simply gestured to the table, where all the printed documents lay in front of him. "Sit down, Ryan," I said, my voice calm but firm. He raised an eyebrow, his cocky grin still on his face, but I could see the slight hesitation in his eyes. "What's this all about?" he asked, trying to feign ignorance. "Are you really going to drag me into another one of your lectures?" Didn't answer. I simply waited, watching him carefully. He glanced down at the papers, his expression briefly flickering with confusion. "What's all this?" he asked again, his voice a little more guarded now. "That's everything," I said, my voice still controlled, though a growing sense of satisfaction bubbled inside me. "Everything you've done behind my back, Ryan. The lies, the manipulation, the financial games. You thought you could take everything from me without consequences, didn't you?" I could see his jaw tighten as he looked at the evidence in front of him, his smugness fading into something more uncomfortable. "You've been planning this for months," I continued, my words measured and deliberate. "Pretending to be the good nephew, pretending to be the victim. But I've seen through your game. You thought I was too naive to notice the way you were setting everything up. The way you slowly started to push me out, the way you lied about your finances, the way you casually dropped hints about evicting me, all of it. It's all right here." Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't let him. I wasn't going to give him a chance to spin his lies anymore. "I have every text you sent," I said, pushing one of the pages toward him. "Every message where you talked about how you were going to take back control. Every conversation where you boasted about how you were going to get rid of the dead weight. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought you could manipulate me into just leaving quietly. But I'm not going anywhere, Ryan. Not until you face the truth." I watched as his face drained of color. I could see the panic starting to set in, the realization that everything he had worked to conceal was now exposed. He started to shuffle through the papers, his hands trembling slightly as he skimmed the messages. His earlier arrogance evaporated, replaced by a cold, silent dread. "I didn't," he started, but I cut him off again, my voice sharp now, full of the anger that had been building inside me for so long. "Save it. I've been patient with you long enough, Ryan. You've taken advantage of me. You've betrayed my trust, and now it's time to pay the price for what you've done." I didn't give him a chance to respond. I knew that if I allowed him to speak, he would try to twist the situation in his favor. Instead, I stood tall, looked him directly in the eye, and delivered the final blow. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady but full of conviction. "And if you want to try to evict me, you're going to have to go through me. And you'll have to explain everything to a judge because you won't win this one. I've already spoken to my lawyer. You're done, Ryan." The silence between us was thick, the weight of the truth hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Ryan stood frozen, staring at me, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. He had never seen me like this before. Not this calm. Not this in control. His mask of smugness had crumbled, and now he was faced with the reality of his actions. "You think you can just walk all over me?" I said, my voice hardening. "You thought I was weak? That I wouldn't fight for what's mine? Well, now you've got the fight of your life." I could see the panic flickering in his eyes as he looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the true face of the person I had been so willing to help. The betrayal was no longer just a sting, it was a crushing weight, one that I would not let him escape from. Ryan didn't say another word. He simply turned and walked out, his head hung low, his footsteps heavy with the realization that everything had fallen apart. As I watched him leave, a strange sense of peace settled over me. The battle wasn't over yet. But in that moment, I knew I had won. I had exposed the truth, stood my ground, and taken back control of my life. Karma had done its job, and now I could move on with my dignity intact. The house was mine. My life was mine. And Ryan? Well, he'd have to deal with the consequences of his actions. And for the first time in months, I felt free.